Hey, what's going on, everybody? You know what time it is. We got a new Slayer trailer, and so, I gotta break it down. Gotta know what I got wrong. Gotta know what I got right from the last video. I would say probably, I'd give myself a 70%, maybe an 80% if I was being nice to myself. But for the most part, pretty on the money. There's some things that definitely did not anticipate. But now that we've got this video release, we're gonna go through it, try to make this as quick as possible, and really uncover what are all of these skills, or to the degree of what could they be? Because once again, we won't know until it releases next week, but let's jump into it. So we've got the introduction video, and we're just seeing our PAs. Of course, something that we already knew from the other headline, these are move, stay, art, photon arts. So basically, use a directional input, don't use a directional input, you get different attacks. One of the things that is different, I thought was Relentless Blade in my last video, is actually the entire photon art. So that photon art is Flowing Cirrus, or Sirius. I guess it is Sirius. Flowing Sirius, always interesting names. I haven't looked up exactly where they come from. But Flowing Sirius is actually this entire sequence. As long as you consecutively hit the button, the PA button that is, you will continue to do a chain of attacks. So this is actually a very long photon art. This isn't Photon Blade that I thought it was. But now, let's get into the actions. So first, normal attack is the gunfire. Pretty obvious, there's nothing special about that. But why is this important? Because it charges. So, what do we know? We know that Charge Blade, which is the skill we saw in the skill tree, is connected to our range normal attacks. And of course they show this, so I'm just gonna blow through it, but we can confirm Charged Blade. So we're just knocking the skill trees off the list and going from there. Now, this is where things get interesting, because what we are seeing is effectively Blade counter. So, as you know, as it was discussed in this video, your slash normal attacks, quote unquote, are your weapon action. So if you want to shoot, that's normal attack button. If you want to slash, that is your weapon action. So guard against enemy attacks with a slash, input a directional dodge attack while slashing. So this is our blade counter. In my previous video, I thought that, this might be connected to the PAs because we have blade counter and we have mobile blade. And mobile blade would be the skill that unlocks your move arts or your move photon arts. But as we know, no, your photon arts, your move stay are naturally built in. There is no skill to unlock them. The blade counter and the mobile counter are the skills that unlock your counter attacks with the weapon action, which is also the button to use your slash attacks. So with that, what do we know from the skill tree? Well, we know what blade counter is. And of course, now we also know blade counter critical up, which was obvious, but when you do a blade counter, which looks like it has hit scan, and for those who might not be familiar with hit scan, basically think of the katana counter or the PA combo finish. I forget exactly the name of it, but that sequence where those slashes automatically track and hit the target where you're aiming, versus other moves where if there's something blocking the view or if it's not 100% line in sight, you won't hit the target. This one looks like it's going to scan and hit whatever you're aiming at, which is interesting, given how many of Katana's issues when it comes to balance is the fact that they don't have to aim their counter. And if you put it on a weak spot, the likelihood is that it's going to hit that weak spot no matter where it is. But, so now we know blade counter, we know blade counter critical up, and essentially mobile blade counter, which is essentially being able to move and slash. Doing that during an enemy attack gives you a counter option as well. And of course, I'll get into that, but we're just knocking down the skills. Even though we skipped through the PAs, let's talk about the Photon Blast. And really the thing to call out is this Photon Blast builds back your focus gear, which is very interesting because we know for Double Saber the Whirlwind, its Photon Blast does the same thing, but that's not always the case for every Photon Blast. And that's actually something that annoys me, because it seems like if a weapon has an active ability of some sort, when you have Photon Blast, give it the ability to charge it. And the one I really want to call out is Talus, Tricky Capacitor. which in of itself isn't a great move. It takes forever to charge, but it just kind of feels like, you use your Talos Photon Blast, you get Tricky Capacitor back. Don't understand why that's not necessarily something that's built in to a lot of these weapons. But for Slayer's sake, it's good to see that, yes, you can have a lot of crafty things of using your focus gauge and getting it back, using it and getting it back because you have things like Overdrive, you have things like your Photon Blast. But now let's get into the skills. And really, the skills are pretty straightforward. Really, this is just confirmation of the things that we discussed. Like, Slug Shot was 100% on the money. Really what we want to focus on is Relentless Blade, but then also talk about Gunblade Focus Overflow. Of course, Gunblade Focus, builds a focus gauge with attacks. You get PP consumption. So basically, I'm pretty sure it reduces your PP. It's a weird way of saying that, but I guess they're working with space. Critical hit rate bonuses, amongst some other things. I think we want to be careful with this one because the critical hit rate bonus should be the Gunblade Focus Critical Up. They make it seem like this one skill is doing all of these things, but seeing how we know what the skill tree looks like, I believe the crit rate is the Gunblade Focus Critical Up, Gunblade Critical Up or Gunblade Focus Critical Up. They are separate, but I guess for the sake of brevity, they're kind of combining those, but just making sure that they're not double downing on crit. These are actually two separate skills that they're talking about. And of course, we know Gunblade Focus Reset. Basically, if you lose focus, you get some PP back. And it looks like if we rewind this again, now we don't know what level this is, because at least if there's only one level, we're getting 10 PP back per focus bar. So what I mean by focus bar is that if we look at the focus meter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the time of the reset, Slayer had 3 bars. We got about 30 PP back. We don't know how many points are actually in this skill. You get 10 PP back on level 1, and then it goes up some incremental amount per bar to level 5. But at least it probably seems like at a base rate, you're gonna get 10 PP back per bar. So of course, if you lose all 5 bars, you'll at least get 50 PP back. That might go up to 100 or whatever it might be with a max 5 points into that skill. Now, Relentless Blade is the interesting one. So in my previous video, what I thought Relentless Blade was essentially the extension of Flowing Sirius. Basically that you hold down the PA button and then it goes into that extended attack sequence, maybe burning focus or maybe burning PP. We do know that it actually does burn PP, but what is Relentless Blade? Well, for those who are old enough, or those who just know, very similar to the Squall Lionheart from Final Fantasy VIII gimmick. So for those who might have been familiar with the turn-based RPG game, all the way back in the day, when you attacked with Squall, or some of his attacks when he attacked with Gunblade, he was the main character, for those who definitely don't know what Final Fantasy VIII was. But when you attacked an enemy, if you timed your button press correctly, he would do an additional attack. It was kind of like, imagine you slash with your Gunblade and then you pull the trigger. So as you're slashing, you're also shooting the enemy. That was essentially the gimmick. It was a timing type of thing while you were in combat. This is effectively that skill, Relentless Blade. So when using a Photon Art, if you use a normal attack during that Photon Art, you will do an additional attack, which does damage, recovers PP, and it looked like in this video covered about 3, but who knows what that looks like when all of your skills are built out. And it also builds focus gauge. So now we look at Relentless Blade. We know what Relentless Blade is. What is Relentless Blade Reinforce? Well, we don't necessarily know what Relentless Blade Reinforce is, but we can guess because we already have 2 skills that share that name, and that is Wand Lover's Line Force, but that's a mistranslation. It should essentially be Reinforce, and Launcher Reinforce. And what do those 2 skills do? They either increase attack speed, or they increase potency, or a combination of the 2. Chances are for Relentless Blade Reinforce, we're not going to get an attack speed up just because it's being triggered during Photon Arts. That gets really tricky if you're going to have a move that's used during Photon Arts that increases Photon Art speed. So not likely. Chances are what this does is that it increases potency. It might also increase the PP recovery, but my hunch is you use this skill, you recover PP, and you get more potency in that attack. So this is definitely something that, you know, when it comes to button combinations for all you slayers out there, you're definitely going to want to get used to this. You know, it's definitely going to be interesting when we look at Flowing Sirius. Once again, the extended PA that goes through all those hits. How many times can we use Relentless Blade? Because that's going to get real interesting when you start combining all of these attacks, managing focus, doing all of these ins and outs. Blade counter. We already discussed this, but essentially unleash a counterattack after guarding with the weapon action. Use a normal attack or a weapon action for different counters. And we see this here. Essentially, most likely, the normal attack will be a shooting counterattack, while the weapon action will be a slash counterattack that does that hit scan. And let me rewind this just a little bit so we can see exactly what's going on. That one is most likely the weapon action. The other one was probably the shot. It was very, very quick. But chances are these are the two different effects that you get when either using the normal attack or the weapon action. And from the very looks of it, the weapon action one looks like hit scan. So once again, let's say the doll wasn't directly in front of you. He was 50 feet in the air. His core was exposed. Chances are this counter is going to hit scan and still more or less hit that spot, similar to Katana. We've already talked about this. We were 100% on the money with Charge Blade as well from the last video, because before we got this video, the only attack that we saw charge was what we now know as the normal attack. And so of course, you hold the normal attack, you go through a charge state, whether that's level 1 or level 2. Afterwards, press a normal attack, Charge Blade, boom, you're right back into the enemy. Now, we do not know what short range hotshot is, but I'm pretty sure I'm 100% on the money from my previous video, which is it increases potency when you hit an enemy with a normal attack or just any attack. We'll see how that one goes. I don't know if it'll be any attack, probably at least a normal attack when in close range. And of course, my theory was short range hotshot and Charge Blade, they have to play together because of where they're positioned on the skill tree. Generally speaking, even though skill trees can sometimes be put all over the place, individual skills, their proximity to others usually has a meaning or relationship. Like when we get into Slugshot and Relentless Blade, they're both during or after Photon arts. So I figured these probably share some type of mechanic, and that is closing the distance, doing more damage. So you can imagine with Charge Blade, you're far away, you charge your normal attack shot, you shoot, you Charge Blade, you're back in. Now that short range kicks in, you're doing more damage. You might be doing more damage with counters, which is interesting. So maybe short range is normal attacks and your weapon action, because technically for Slayer, your weapon action is a normal attack. So this is interesting because now you've got some powerful Photon arts, but now you've got powerful counters or potentially powerful counters, just given the fact that this is NGS. And you're going to be doing more damage now that you stayed in range. So it's going to be very, very interesting of managing that distance, managing your Photon arts, but then also probably leveraging your counters a lot. And we're going to get into that. I'm kind of focusing on that a lot because the other thing I want to cover once we get in these skill trees is the viability of Gunblade as a subclass weapon. But I digress. Let's get through the rest of this because we only got really one more skill to go through that we don't know about and we can't guess. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Slugshot. Once again, 100% on the money, though we just talked about this a little bit in this video. Essentially, without Slugshot, after doing a Photon art, you'll just go into your normal shooting attack. But with Slugshot activated, you kind of go into a very quick charge of your level 2 normal attack charge shot. And I know that was very wordy. But essentially, the attack that you do when charging to level 2 of your normal attack is a similar, if not identical, but of course we won't know, similar attack to Slugshot, which is triggered after a Photon art with no directional input. So of course you see in the video what it looks like without the skill, what it looks like with the skill. Of course they hit the UI, so we don't know what other effects it potentially does. Unreleased Rage. I want to stop here because we know what Unreleased Rage is and we've known for a while. But what we didn't know was how this happens. So what I want you to do is, First, look at the active skill in the sub palette. You see the icon, you see it's black, we know it's active, we know that's Unreleased Rage because they're highlighting it. It's got a cooldown. I want to rewind the video and I want you to focus, no pun intended, on the focus gear. What did we see? Before Slayer activates Unreleased Rage, there was no focus. You had 0 bar. After using Unreleased Rage, we have 1 bar of focus. So what does this mean? This means that Unreleased Rage is not dependent on focus. It doesn't require maximum focus. It doesn't take away focus. It is essentially its own skill with what appears to be a 20-second cooldown. Now, I can try and eagle eye this. Maybe we'll slow it down, see if we can get it. I want to see if it has a gear gauge that we can tell, because it's probably that's what it's going to be. Is that similar to things like compound techniques, similar to things like photon blast, similar to things like spread shots, active abilities that have their own meter gauge that you build through attacks. Pinion blade, just kind of going through the list of different examples. So let's see if we can see it. Now I've slowed this down to 25%, and it doesn't look like it has one, which is interesting. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons, but I'm not gonna lean into this too much because it could just be something that they're not showing. It'd be very interesting if this is an attack that you can use after every 20 seconds. And I say, but it does kind of make sense, because if we think about Unreleased Rage After Effect, which they've also announced essentially being that it increases your critical hit rate for a certain period of time. So this might not actually be a very powerful ability. It's just one of those things where, hey, every 20 seconds or so, you can keep your crit rate high. You can build a bar of focus, because it looked like with one enemy, it builds a bar of focus and kind of move on with your day. But now I'm really guessing here. But because it's not connected to the focus, I believe we have a better idea of what Gunblade Focus Overflow could be. Because once again, if you look at that skill, it's got a clock, a blue clock in the top right corner. What do we know about blue clocks in NGS? We see them in things like short cycles. We see them like Photon Flare short cycle, Hunter Physique short cycle. It is cooldown related. Well, now of course we can also look at, and we need to look at Overdrive again, but just looking at here, well, we have a cooldown. So it could be that with Gunblade Focus Overflow, when let's say you have max focus meter, because overflow, you're overflowing the meter, maybe it does something to the rate in which this charges. If it does charge, I still feel like this isn't just a button you press every 20 seconds. That just feels odd. But it could also reduce the cooldown. Say, hey, instead of waiting 20 seconds, now you're down to 10, 15. You're rapidly using this to build focus. You're rapidly using this to keep your crit rate up. And then of course, when you have maximum focus, this now either increases the rate in which it charges, if it does have that meter, and it reduces that focus. And Overdrive could play into this as well, because essentially Overdrive automatically maxes your focus even though it will eat it up later. So this is what I'm thinking that Gunblade Focus Overflow is all about. Now, what else does that potentially mean if I am correct? Well, if it is playing off of Unreleased Rage is a main class ability. And we know this because they told us. So if Gunblade Focus Overflow directly interacts with Unreleased Rage, then likely Unreleased Rage is also a main class only skill, which gets interesting. And I have theories about this, which kind of comes into balance. Gunblade Focus Critical Up, like Blade Counter Critical Up, and Unreleased Rage After Effect, they're all crit related skills. My guess is They're all likely main class only, or at the very least, gunblade only, which is kind of a given. But something tells me that it's like, no, this is Slayer. You gotta be Slayer main class to get these crit skills. If you're using gunblade as just a sub weapon, you're probably not gonna have access to these crit skills. You're probably only gonna have access to critical up and gallant attack critical up, which is the one we believe you attack a boss and you get that critical up rate. But once again, we're gonna get into gunblade as a subclass weapon in a little bit. But let's see what else we gotta go through. And then we have gunblade focus overdrive. Now, once again, it does itself have a cooldown. It's hard to see it because when the overdrive activates, you quickly see 90 seconds, which is going to be its cooldown, but then it shows its active timer, which is 30 seconds. And then, of course, if you look at your focus meter, it is also maxed out. So once again, the theory is if you have overflow, because once again, your meter's maxed out, there's probably some relationship to unreleased rage. It's hard to tell whether or not there's some interactions with overdrive, but I feel like that's a bit too much. That's a bit crazy for something like overdrive, which increases your focus and leads to overflow, to then also get the benefit of getting some type of cooldown reduction. Those things just don't make sense. That thing is kind of broken unless you had a skill like overdrive that was more than 90 seconds. But given the fact that this looks like a pretty short cooldown, my thoughts are overdrive, overflow are actually buffing or boosting unreleased rage. And all of these skills are main class only. Yada, yada, yada. Moving on. That is pretty much it from the skill tree. So I think looking at my previous video and now looking at this video, if you're listening, we should have a good idea of what all of the Slayer skill tree skills are. And I'll go through them quickly. Gunblade focus. You build up focus, you get things like increased potency, you get things like PP reduction, PP recovery. And then of course you have Gunblade focus gear amplify, which essentially amplifies the rate in which you build focus. You've got Gunblade focus reset PP gain. When you lose focus, you get PP back. Gunblade focus critical up. The more focus you have, the higher your crit rate is to some value. Then we get into Gunblade focus overdrive, which is our active ability, which also maxes our focus meter for 30 seconds. And of course we get all of the benefits of having max focus. Gunblade focus overflow. When you've got max focus, either from overdrive or just doing attacks, it increases the benefits of unreleased rage, whether that's reducing its cooldown or reducing how quickly it charges, if it does charge. Then we have unreleased rage, which is our active ability, which does it's a damage big hit, but it also leads to the after effect, which increases our hit rate. We know critical up, we know gallant attack critical up, we know critical hit PP gain. I guess focusing on critical hit PP gain, I don't think it's as powerful as a lot of people think. I don't think this is just going to be every time that you crit, you're going to get PP back, unless it's just very minuscule PP. I think it's one of those things where you have a chance, 10%, 20%, 30%, it goes up to 5 levels. So whatever that percentage is, to regain PP on a critical hit, there might be a cooldown, but chances are it might be like for a subclass, it's like 25% chance. And then for Slayer, it's 50% chance. Short range hot shot, even though we didn't see it in this video, we kind of see from Charged Blade and other iconography across skills, when in close proximity to the enemy, you're going to be doing increased potency. Is that increased photon arts? I'm not too sure, given the fact that you've got your other gunblade focus skills, but for sure, probably your normal attack. And because your weapon action essentially is a normal attack, it's going to probably boost those two things. Charged Blade, you charge your normal attack, either level 1, level 2. After releasing the gunfire, you press your normal attack again. Actually, no, excuse me, not normal attack. You're gonna press your weapon action, because your weapon action is your blade. And basically it does a dash chase, which chases the enemy, closes distance. Speaking of blade, they showed us blade counter, mobile blade, which also comes with a mobile blade counter, is essentially skills that equip the counter effect abilities for your gun blade while using the weapon action. Blade counter critical up. Of course, when you're doing a regular blade counter, so you're not moving, you're not using mobile blade, you get a critical up effect. So that's going to be interesting with unreleased rage after effect. You've got the critical up, you've got your crit skills, you've got the focus gear, and you've got short range hot shot. It seems like blade counter is going to be very, very, very powerful. So something to look out for. And then slug shot, you get a big blast counter, not blast counter, you get a big blast shot after using PAs. Relentless blade. During PAs, you press your normal attack or your weapon action. I think they said normal attack. And you do an additional attack during your PAs with Relentless Blade Reinforce, most likely increasing potency just because that follows the same lines of Launcher and Wand Reinforce. Once again, I am thinking now we're going to get into the subclass aspects of this. Similar to Waker, I don't think Gunblade is going to be a real viable subclass weapon. What I mean by that is saying that you're Tector Slayer, you're Braver Slayer, and you're going to be using Gunblade. I don't think we're going to be in the same type of situation that we were with Katana, similar to the fact that we're not in the same situation we are with Waker. You don't see Tector running around, Tector Waker, because with Harmonizer, because we can't use Marmello Parry, which is a big, DPS potency rotation for Waker. I think that's what you're seeing here. When we look at Gunblade, when we look at how these skills are connected, specifically the crit skills, Unreleased Rage into After Effect, Gunblade Focus Overflow, which is connected to Gunblade Focus Critical Up. It feels like these skills are going to be main class only. We already know Overdrive is. We know Unreleased Rage is, and thus by effect, Unreleased Rage After Effect is. If I'm correct in that Overflow influences or affects Unreleased Rage, well then you wouldn't have a skill that is influencing a main class skill that would not be main class, because then it'd just be redundant. It doesn't do anything. So then the question becomes, Critical Up, could that be a main class skill? I want to say yes, because that starts reducing the power that subclasses can use and potentially abuse this. And so same thing when we look at the power of Blade Counter Critical Up and that hit scan and all the other abilities that look like they're going to be influencing the damage of that ability. Blade Counter Critical Up is probably also a main class only skill. Relentless Blade, probably Relentless Blade in of itself, similar to Wand Lovers. That's actually probably a good example. Is probably Gunblade only. So what that means is that you can use that as your subclass, but Reinforce, like Wand, Line Force, is main class only. So when you look across the board, ignoring the Critical Up, Gallant Critical Up, and Critical Hit PP gain, there's a lot of things missing from Gunblade if you aren't Slayer as your main class. And when you look at the focus meter and you look at all the things that come with the focus meter and Overdrive and Unreleased Rage as a way of keeping focus and doing all these things, you're at a detriment of building focus, maintaining, and reaping the benefits. In addition, not being main class, unless you're Tector, which changes a little bit because of Shifta, you're already at a 10% main class bonus detriment. So you got to remember, when you're Slayer using Gunblade, you're going to get that 10% main class bonus damage like you do with any class. But if you're not Slayer, you're not going to get it. So you're already 10% damage behind. And I think a lot of the abilities, which is going to be your crit, but also things like Unreleased Rage and Overdrive, they're going to be locked. And so I don't think we're going to have to worry about, oh, here comes the braver Gunblade. I don't really think that's going to be the case, similar to how no one other than Waker can use the full potential of the Waker class. And without certain things that Waker can do, it's kind of pointless to have Waker as a subclass for the use of a Harmonizer. But of course, this is just me looking at things from a video. Who knows what we'll actually have? I could be completely wrong. These Gunblade focused critical skills could be just Gunblade only. And there might be a class who can pull off Gunblade as a sub weapon, and we've got Katana all over again. But something tells me that's probably not the case. With that said, it still has a lot of good skills. Critical Up, the Gallant Critical Attack Up, Critical PP gain, all great. Critical hit rate and those benefits are all fine. For me, I think the most valuable thing is probably going to be Charge Blade. Now, once again, I'm speaking as a Tector main. One of the issues that we have is that we don't have vertical chase. One of the reasons why Tector Bouncer is so versatile and powerful is not just because of surge impulse on down, but it's also because surge impulse can vertically track. Without using jet boots, we kind of lose that ability, but now it looks like we have probably one, if not two. We have the first Photon art, Shifting Spica, I'm not too sure the language that it's borrowing from, and Charged Blade. So while we might lose jet boots if we go to Slayer, we have a suitable replacement to make sure we're vertically tracking that could be better. Other than that, let me know your thoughts in the comments. You know, we're only, 5-6 days away, depending on when you've seen this video, or maybe you're seeing this video afterwards due to the algorithm. But let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see what happens when Slayer releases next week. Other than that, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.